Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Adult Bible Class. Good to see you joining us live in the classroom this morning. We've got another great lesson out of the great book today. This is not the title. Surprise! This is just to build intrigue. This is just to get you to come. And now you've come. And so I'll give you the real title. The real title is The Lord of the Sabbath, but I was afraid that wasn't intriguing enough for some of you, and I wanted to intrigue you, so I wanted to ask you that question. We'll answer that question today, but this is a title that Jesus gives himself. Do you know what we call a name that a person gives themselves? I didn't, but here's a new word for everybody. Autonym. Autonym. It's like homonym, synonym, antonym, except it's autonym. It means a self-name. And this is a self-name that Jesus gave himself. Well, he's going to give himself this title in the lesson. But you already know one of Jesus' most popular autonyms. In fact, it is his most popular autonym. It's Son of Man. Jesus adopted that phrase for himself. It comes out of the prophecy of Daniel. There's a specific prophecy in there. And Son of Man by itself just means a human. But in Daniel's prophecy, Daniel sees a Son of Man, a human, and he's given an everlasting kingdom by the Ancient of Days. This is kind of code word for God the Father is going to give Jesus an everlasting kingdom. And so Jesus picked up that autonym, Son of Man, and he uses it for himself. But in our lesson today, in our key verse, Jesus is going to use not one, but two autonyms in the same sentence. He's going to say, the Son of Man, which is one of his autonyms, is Lord of the Sabbath, which is another one of his autonyms. And so that's kind of like the climax of our lesson today. But don't worry, it'll be exciting again when we get to it, I promise. So, let me ask you some questions here. First of all, somebody might say, where's all the disciples? Because that's not all of them, right? Did you count them yet? Jackie, did you account for them? Well, this right here is a shoulder of a guy that's hidden behind this guy. But still counting Jesus, that's only 11. Where is the 12th? Philip is taking the picture. Philip's taking the picture, and so that's why there's 11 plus 1. But let me ask you some more questions. Why are they in the grain field? Well, they are hungry, but the reason they're in the grain field is not because they're hungry. They're passing through. They've taken a shortcut. Remember, there weren't roads back then, but there were paths, and people would have paths through their field. You can't really see the path here, but imagine there's a path there. But they're passing through, and here's another question. Whose field is it? We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us, but apparently it did not belong to any of these guys or anybody they knew, because if it would have been, we probably would have gotten a name of who owns this field. So they're just cutting through somebody's field. They're taking a shortcut. Why do they have stuff in their hands? Looks like grain. Because they're hungry, Phil said. One more question. What day is it? Not today, but here. What day is it? Right? Otherwise known as the cease from your work day or the stop from your work day. That's what the word Sabbath means. It doesn't mean seventh, which you might have thought. Sabbath, seventh, doesn't mean that. It means ceasing. It literally means ceasing, stopping. It's the day that you stop doing, not you, but the Jews, because the Sabbath was for the Jews. We're going to read that today. It was for the Jews. If you're not Jewish, it's not for you. The Sabbath was a ceasing, a stopping of work day. It was a holiday, or we call it a holiday, actually a holy day. That's where the holiday came from. It was a holy day to allow people to rest, to give everybody a day off at the same time so that competition would still remain when you come back to work on Monday. Nobody's able to work on Sunday to get ahead of you, or Saturday, the seventh day. Nobody's able to work on the Sabbath, so you don't have to worry about taking off because everybody's taking off on the Sabbath. So that's the culture that the Jews were in. So we're going to cover that today. One more thing, two more things. This story is in all three of the synoptics. We're going to read it in Matthew 12 because that's the best text for the most details. But we're going to get one detail out of Luke and another detail out of Mark so that we get the full picture from all three of the synoptic gospels. You know what they are, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. One final thing, get ready. Fasten your Bible belts. Because we've got 7 Old Testament flashbacks that we're going to do today. 7. Oh, can you believe that? Can we even do that? Is it possible? Let's see what we can do, okay? All right, so the fourth commandment from Yahweh to Israel says, "For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath," or a ceasing from work, or a stopping of work of the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. So this is one of the 10, and Israel had trouble keeping this one, as well as all the commandments concerning idolatry. And after fooling around in disobedience for many years, they finally found out that the Lord was serious about them being holy, and they refused to be holy, and so the Lord took them out of the promised land and they lost their possessions. But he's merciful. And after 70 years, he allowed them to come back into the promised land, but life was never the same. Life was never the same because now the Gentiles are ruling over the Jews. And it's going to be that way, and it is that way today. And it's been that way since they came back to the promised land. So life was never the same. But during this time, when they came back to the promised land, a group of people formed an organization, and they called themselves the Pharisees. It means the separated ones. That sounds so special, doesn't it? The separated ones. They formed this group, and the formation of the group was to preserve the nation, to keep them from going back to idolatry and to forgetting the Sabbath and to breaking the commandments, because if they fool around with that too much, they're going to find out that God's serious and he will send more judgment. And so the Pharisees developed so that they could keep the nation strict and pure and clean and holy and serving the Lord and obeying the commandments. But by the time Jesus came, you know, humans, we have a bad habit of when we have power, we want to make rules. I don't know how many hundreds and maybe thousands of laws are on the books in just the federal books, the federal laws of this country. It's mind-blowing. I found out raising my children that you can never make enough rules to cover all situations. Normally what I did was I made a rule and then I made a lot of exceptions because they all came up with exceptions. And so then you have to make exceptions for this and exceptions for that. And by the time Jesus came, there was a whole list of exceptions that the Pharisees had made on how you can obey the Sabbath and not get in trouble with God. But these are people making up these rules, okay? So in Matthew 12 today, Jesus is going to have two, not one, but two conflicts with the Pharisees, both concerning this day called the Sabbath, or the cease from work day. So in our lesson today, Jesus and the 12 are passing through a grain field, and yes, it is the Sabbath, and yes, they are hungry, and the grain is ripe, and they begin to pluck or harvest the grain and separate the husk. Luke tells us this detail. They separate the husk with their hands, just like what you see they're doing right here. It's a type of, on a large scale, they would have been threshing this wheat or grain, whatever kind of grain it was. But by hand, you could just peel the husks off, and then you would have the kernels inside, and then you could eat them if they were ripe. So apparently they were ripe at this time. But according to the Pharisees' interpretation, that peeling of the husk off of the kernel is work. It's a form of harvesting. It's a form of processing the food, and they outlawed that on the Sabbath day. And so they see Jesus' disciples do this. it doesn't say, even though the picture shows, it looks like Jesus is participating, but the Bible doesn't say that Jesus was doing it, but it says the disciples were. And who's writing this? Matthew. We're reading it out of the Gospel of Matthew today. He's one of these guys. I don't know which one. They didn't wear name tags. But Matthew's one of these guys, and he specifically says, because he's in the group, Mark doesn't say this, Luke doesn't say this, but Matthew says they were hungry. So he knows he was one of the group, and they were hungry. So the Pharisees say, aha, they're breaking the law. They're not obeying what Moses said. But Jesus gives a 3-point defense. Isn't that nice? He gives them 3 different reasons why this is okay. But they don't like it. And then Jesus goes into the synagogue probably the same day, because the Bible says on the Sabbath, and he heals a man on the Sabbath, which is also considered working. So the Pharisees were there. They saw Jesus do it, and they said, And that's when Jesus comes out with his statement, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And so Jesus stuns them when he says that, because basically what he's saying is, I'm in charge of the Sabbath, not you guys. And that was a truth bomb that Jesus dropped on them, and it was so strong that they left and began plotting to kill him. This is the conflict that really drove them over the edge. This plus the healing in the synagogue on the Sabbath, which was probably the same day. Those 2 things is what drove the Pharisees to the point of saying, we've got to kill this man. There's no other choice. We've got to kill him. And so that sets up the whole rest of the drama throughout the Gospels. All right, so let's get into it. There's what he said, and that was too much for them. The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. So let's see how it happened. You ready, Jackie?
At that time, Jesus passed through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to pick and eat some heads of grain.
Okay, so here we go. Count them. Number 1, flashback number 1. We're going back into Deuteronomy. I want to show you that the law provided for what the disciples are doing right here. Read it to us, Jackie.
When you enter your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck heads of grain with your hand, but do not put a sickle to your neighbor's grain.
So the law said, anytime you're walking by anybody's field, doesn't matter if you know who owns it or not, you can take what you can grab with your hands and you can eat it. You just can't bring farming equipment into somebody else's field and start taking up big swaths of their crop. But if you're walking through, right here in Deuteronomy, it says you can walk through, pluck with your hands what you can take. So they're well within the law, except wrong day, right? This is the cease from work day, the Sabbath. And so the Pharisees say, they're working. Do you think they're working? Well, that's not what they did for a living. Some people harvested grain for a living, possibly, but it wasn't their weekly job to do. But typically, it was forbidden whether you did it every day of the week or not. The Pharisees said, no. You can't harvest, you can't separate grain, you can't process food on the not working day. All right? So, what's Jesus going to say? What's the Pharisees going to say?
When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, "See, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." Okay, so they are giving Jesus a flashback. They're flashing Jesus back to the 10 Commandments, and you know where the 10 are. The 10 are in 20. The 10 are in 20. So here we are, Exodus 20. Give it to us, Jackie. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy.
Remember it. What Sabbath day is there at this point? I thought this is when the Sabbath started, huh? This is the 10 Commandments. This is it. Well, not exactly. He says there's already a not working day. There's already a stop your work day, a cease from work day. Remember it is what the commandment said, to keep it holy. It's already there. You just have to remember it. Read a little more, Jackie.
For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male slave or your female slave, or your cattle, or your resident who stays with you.
No exceptions. Everybody. Nobody in the nation is to do any work. You shall not do any work. That's plain as day, right there in mustard. You shall not do any work. No questions about that. It applies to everybody. But here's a little stipulation.
For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and everything that is in them, and he rested on the seventh day. For that reason, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy.
So the original Sabbath day was the seventh day of creation. That's the day the Lord rested, but he didn't rest from all his work. God is still working. God is still working today. But he rested from his creative work. He's not creating planets and galaxies and Milky Ways and supernova remnants and all that stuff. He's not doing that today. He's resting from that, but he's still working. Jesus said, my Father's working and I'm working. So we know that the Father didn't just stop everything altogether, but he rested from his creative work. And that is the seventh day that this is to remember. Remember the not working day. That's this day, the seventh day of creation. That's what he's saying. So remember this. And when you do, you're keeping it holy and you're keeping it to the Lord. You're not doing any work that day. So that was for Israel. Now we're coming back to Matthew, back from the flashback, and Jesus is going to begin his 3-point defense of his disciples because they've been charged. The Pharisees have charged the disciples with breaking the law of Moses. So they're going to have to pay some kind of consequence unless Jesus can get him out of this bind. And here he goes with his 3-point defense.
He said to them, haven't you read what David did?
Oh, this is a little upsetting to the Pharisees because they are really good readers. Not everybody can read in this society. Not everybody can read, but the Pharisees were readers and they were good readers. So to ask them if they had read or not, I mean, you could ask some people in this day and they would say, no, I haven't read because I don't know how to read. But to ask the Pharisees, they knew how to read. And he said, haven't you read? And then this is their hero, David. He is the great king of Israel. Nobody greater than David up to this point. Haven't you read what David did? If they had read anything, it would be about David. They knew, they had the stories of David memorized. He was the national hero. So for Jesus to say, haven't you read what David did? He's questioning their most basic understanding of the law. It's like, don't you know your ABCs? That's how simplistic this is when he's saying, haven't you read what David did? So let's read what David did. What example did Jesus give?
When he and those who were with him were hungry, how he entered the house of God, and they ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for him or those who with him to eat, but only for the priests.
Oh, so he brings up this story, and you might have missed Sunday school that day, and you might not even know what this story is about, so we're going to read it in just a minute. But this came from the Old Testament stories about David. Let's flash back real quick. This is the commandment from Leviticus where the cakes were to be made. Read it quickly, Jackie.
Then you shall take fine flour and bake 12 cakes with it. 2/10 of an ephah shall be in each cake, and you shall set them in 2 rows, 6 to a row, on the pure gold table before the Lord. You shall put pure frankincense on each row, so that it may be a memorial portion for the bread, an offering by fire to the Lord. Every Sabbath day he shall set it in order before the Lord continually, and it is an everlasting covenant for the sons of Israel.
All right, so that's Moses giving the Levites their commandments about how to deal with this bread. This goes in the tabernacle, which was the tent that they carried around the wilderness. Eventually, they built a permanent temple in Jerusalem, and all the things that were in the tent went into the permanent temple, including this table of bread. But now here's another flashback for you. I didn't give you the sound on this one, but we're going to 1 Samuel because I want you to see the story of when David ate this holy bread that he wasn't supposed to eat.
Then David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech came trembling to meet David and said to him, why are you alone and no one with you?
So this is before David was king. Saul was still king. Saul was jealous of David. Saul was chasing David. David was running. And he's got a band of men with him that are fighting for him and protecting him. It's his security detail. I mean, it says you're alone, but he had his men with him. But this priest wants to know, what are you doing out here, David?
David said to Ahimelech the priest, "The king has commissioned me with a matter and has said to me, no one is to know anything about the matter on which I am sending you, and with which I have commissioned you. And I have directed the young men to a certain place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever can be found."
So David and his men are running from King Saul. This is actually a lie. This is David telling a lie. I'm sorry. And who did he lie to? He lied to a priest. David lied to a priest. He's running for his life. He's scared that Saul's going to kill him because Saul's jealous. And he's running around and he's got his little troop of soldiers with him that are protecting him. And they're hungry, just like the disciples. Remember the disciples walking through the field and they were hungry? Here's David and his men, and they're on the run and they're hungry. And he finds the tabernacle and he knows what's in there. There's some of that bread, that holy bread, the 12 loaves. Remember from Leviticus, Moses told the Levites how to bake the bread and where to put it and what to do with it. And David goes, I know there's some bread in there. We need something to eat. Can you give us some bread? What did the priest say?
The priest answered David and said, "There is no ordinary bread on hand, but there is consecrated bread. If only the young men have kept themselves from women." He
said, I've got some holy bread here, and if y'all have been around women, you can't have the holy bread. If you've been with a woman today, now I had to look this up because I wanted to get the details, but so if a man was with a woman intimately, then they were both unclean until sunset. It was just the law. It doesn't mean that men and women together are unclean of themselves, but yeah, until you have your shower, Jay said, you're still unclean. So the priest said, hey, have y'all seen any women around lately like today? And David
answered the priest and said to him, "Be assured, women have been denied to us as previously when I left, and the bodies of the young men were consecrated, though it was an ordinary journey. How much more then will their bodies be consecrated today?" He
said, hey, we're just traveling. We haven't seen any women, unfortunately. Be assured, we haven't seen any women. And so what happened?
So the priest gave him consecrated bread, for there was no bread there except the bread of the presence, which was removed from its place before the Lord, in order to put hot bread in its place on the day it was taken away.
This sounds like all kinds of rule breaking, and it was. It was rule breaking. They're breaking the rules. But Jesus used this as an example to defend his disciples for taking that grain and harvesting it and processing it and eating it out of their hands on the Sabbath day. This is his first answer. Now, he's going to give a second one.
Or haven't you read?
Oh, he likes this. He's going to do it to him again. Or haven't you read? He's going to give him another. Do you know your ABCs of the Old Testament? Haven't you read? What is he going to say?
In the law that on Sabbath days the priests in the temple violate the Sabbath and are innocent?
What? The law tells the priest to violate the Sabbath every Sabbath. Did you know that?
Because they're working.
The law contradicts the law. Uh-oh. So what do? Well, they obey one law and they break another law. The priest, well, let's read it. You want to read it? Let's read it. Here's another flashback. Numbers 28, this is where the priests are commanded to work on the Sabbath.
Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Then on the Sabbath day 2 male lambs, 1 year old without defect, and 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, and it's a drink offering. This is the burnt offering of every Sabbath, in addition to the continual burnt offering and its drink offering."
On every Sabbath, the priests have to go through this processing of sacrifices. That's work. It's a mess. They've got to clean up afterwards. There's blood. There's fur. There's all kinds of nasty stuff. There's fire. There's smoke. There's soot. There's ashes. All of that's involved. And they've got to do that and clean it up every Sabbath. So the priests are working on the Sabbath. And Jesus says, what do you think about that? Huh? And what else is he going to say?
I tell you that something greater than the temple is here.
Oh, Jesus is not trying to make peace with these people at all. He's not trying to make peace. It's like he just keeps poking them and poking them. I tell you that something greater than the temple is here. Now, he's talking about himself. But that didn't sit well with them either. Something greater than the temple. I mean, the temple was right beneath God in their opinion. The temple is where God lived in their opinion. We know God can't be compressed into anything. God can't be compressed at all. But that was their representation of God in the temple. And so when Jesus said something greater than the temple is here, ooh, that's upsetting because this is hitting at their authority. They had authority over the temple. They said what was allowed and what could be done, and they controlled the temple. But here's Jesus. He's saying, I am greater than the temple. And now one more. He's going to give them one more flashback just for 3 so he can round it out to 3.
If you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent.
All right, so this is a quote. It's in golden because it came from Yahweh in the Old Testament. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. I thought God did desire sacrifice. Didn't he command the sacrifice? Didn't we just read about the commandment of the priest? They have to do these sacrifices every Sabbath day. And here's God saying, yeah, I really don't want that. What I really want is this. It's a comparison. It's not that the Lord is saying, okay, we're going to cancel all the sacrifices in the sacrifice system. They didn't cancel that. But God said, comparatively speaking, I want mercy so much that it is as if I don't even care about sacrifices. The thing I want is mercy. And who's the mercy for? It's for people. The mercy is for the people. And God said, that's what I want. I don't really want the sacrifices, even though I've told you to do them. What I really want is mercy. And so Jesus said, if you understood this phrase from the Old Testament, we're going to read it again. You know, I'm going to flash you back, but we're going to read this. But Jesus said, if you understood this is kind of another form of haven't you read? Haven't you read? If you understood what this meant, you would not have condemned the innocent. He said, my disciples are innocent. The disciples are innocent. They're not breaking the law. The law said they can take handfuls. And the law didn't say that they couldn't separate wheat in their hand on the Sabbath. It said, you stop your work. You stop your work on the stop from work day. But this was not their regular work. And so Jesus says they're innocent. Let's read it back from Hosea. There's 2 parts here. There's going to be 2 screens. This first part is Hosea, the prophet, talking to Israel, trying to get them to come back to the Lord and obey him. And then the second screen will be the Lord talking to Israel.
Come, let's return to the Lord, for he has torn us, but he will heal us. He has wounded us, but he will bandage us. He will revive us after 2 days. He will raise us up on the 3rd day, that we may live before him. So let's learn. Let's press on to know the Lord. His appearance is as sure as the dawn, and he will come to us like the rain, as the spring rain waters the earth.
What a guy, Hosea, huh? What a guy. And this guy's been through a lot, right? His wife has been leaving him, and he keeps going to get her because the Lord says, go get her. And then she keeps leaving him again. And it's a picture of Israel and the Lord. And so he's experiencing this rejection, just like the Lord is being rejected by Israel. Hosea is being rejected by his wife during this story that he's writing here. But he says, look, let's return to the Lord. I know God tore us up. I know God wounded us. I know he almost killed us. But then he's going to bring us back. He's going to heal us. He's going to bandage us. He's going to bring us back. He's going to raise us up on the 3rd day. I know it's been bad, Hosea said. You don't know what I've been through with my wife, Hosea may have said. But look, the Lord is merciful. I was willing to take my wife back, and the Lord is willing to take us back, Israel. Come on, let's get it together, and let's return to the Lord. And now, let's read what the Lord says about this. This is his portion.
What shall I do with you, Ephraim? And what shall I do with you, Judah? For your loyalty is like a morning cloud, and like the dew which goes away early. Therefore I have cut them in pieces by the prophets. I have slain them by the words of my mouth, and the judgments on you are like the light that shines.
So God here is, he's confirming, yes, I did do all that to hurt you. I did do all that to hurt you, but I'm trying to hurt you so you come back to me. I'm not trying to hurt you to kill you. I'm just trying to get your attention. I did let you go through pain. I did let you go through suffering. But I'm trying to figure out what to do with you. What am I going to do with you? It's like God doesn't know what to do. That's pretty bad. He said, what shall I do with you? You're not loyal to me. You're just like the dew. When the sun comes up, you're gone. Poof. You won't stay true to me. But here's the climax of it right here.
For I desire loyalty rather than sacrifice, and the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. But like Adam, they have violated the covenant. There they have dealt treacherously with me.
All right, so this is where Jesus got his quotation where he said, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. The word loyalty here is really steadfast love, and it includes mercy. So that's why Jesus said mercy instead of loyalty. But they're really forms of love. Mercy is a form of love. Loyalty is a form of love. And so what he's really saying is here, I want you to love me, not just sacrifice to me. And that's what Jesus said to the Pharisees that day. So here we go, back from the flashback, back to Matthew. And this is where he said, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. So comparatively speaking, yes, God does want sacrifice. But comparatively speaking, he wants mercy so much and so badly that it's as if the sacrifices mean nothing to him compared to mercy. So mercy is God's number one thing. Now put that in the context of Jesus' disciples, and they're hungry. And they're doing what the law says they can do, which is grab other people's grain as you're walking through their fields. As long as you don't bring instruments to harvest, you can just grab it with your hand and you can eat it. But it's the no worky day, right? It's the no work day. It's the cease from your work day. And that's the problem that the Pharisees want to pick on. But Jesus has given them 3 examples from the Old Testament. David ate the showbread, which was illegal. What was the second one? The priests have to violate the Sabbath according to the law. So they're breaking one law while they're obeying another law. And then Jesus says, mercy is so much more important to me than sacrifice. And in this word sacrifice includes all the law, all the tasks, all the things that they had to do to fulfill the law of Moses. And Jesus said mercy is more important than all of that. So what he's really saying is, can't you have some mercy on my hungry disciples? They're not breaking the Sabbath law. That's what Jesus said. All right, and then Mark is going to give us a statement that Matthew and Luke don't give. So we're going to bring in one verse from Mark, and then we'll go back to Matthew for the end. But read this, Jackie.
The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath.
So Mark is the only one that gives us the purpose, and he says that Jesus said this. It's in red letters. The Sabbath was made for man, to help man, to be a blessing to man, to give man a day off with no competition. Nobody else is working, so it's equal footing for everybody. You know, if you're self-employed and you're depending on yourself to survive, especially when you're starting out and you're not making it yet, you work every day and you work nights and weekends until you get enough momentum going that you can start taking some time off. But you work until you've got some money coming in. I've been through this a couple of times in my life. And you work until you get that momentum going, and then finally you get a check. Oh, it's so exciting. It doesn't pay for anything, but you got a check. Somebody mailed you a check, and then pretty soon another one, and then another one comes in, and people are giving you money all of a sudden, but you're working for it. So, but the Sabbath was a day off where everybody took off. Nobody could get ahead of anybody else because everybody took that day off, so it was fair. But Jesus said it was made for your benefit. It was not to serve the law. We're not made to serve the law. The law is a process to bring us to the Lord. But the end result is to bring us to the Lord, not to get us to obey rules. God wants our heart. He wants mercy. He wants those inward things. But we use these outward things, these outward rules, to help control our activities so that we don't get outside of what God has told us that we can and cannot do and we should and should not do. But it wasn't for us to serve the Sabbath, or for the Jews to, I say us, but it wasn't for the Jews to serve the Sabbath. They weren't supposed to be slaves to it. And by the time Jesus came along, the Pharisees had so many nitpicking rules. And you know what most of the rules were? How to get around the law. They have so many workarounds. For instance, there was a 2,000 step limit, or 2,000 cubit limit for travel on the Sabbath. Now, who made that up? The Pharisees. God didn't say that. That's not in the law of Moses. But they said, hey, these people are traveling on the Sabbath. We've got to curtail this because we don't want God to come and judge us in case we're breaking the law. So in case God doesn't want us traveling on the Sabbath, did he say don't travel on the Sabbath? No, he said don't work on the Sabbath. The point was, Jesus said, you were never meant to serve the Sabbath. And not only were they not serving the Sabbath, but they were serving the rules that the Pharisees had made. That's what made it even worse, because they learned how to get around it. You can travel 2,000 steps, but if you've planted a garden 2,000 steps from your house, technically that's another house. So you can travel 2,000 steps to your garden, and then that's another home, so to speak. And then you can go 2,000 more steps. So what it was a way to get around the rules. So there was so many exceptions of what you could and could not do. And people learned, we can get around the rules by this and that. If you had two houses together and you stretched a rope from one to the other, now they're connected. So you don't have to count your steps because they're connected with a rope. So now you can go to your neighbor's house and then you can start counting your 2,000 steps. This is ridiculous, right? They're just making up things to get around the law. And they had developed a whole system for how to do things on the Sabbath without technically breaking God's law. But that's not what God wanted. God wanted everybody to have a rest day, not to make up 50 ways to cheat the law. And that's what it had become. And that's what Jesus is not happy about. And then his final statement here.
For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath.
Oh, they didn't like that at all because they thought they were the lords of the Sabbath. The Pharisees said, we control the rules around here. We tell the people what they can and cannot do because we're keeping them holy. But nobody can make you holy. Nobody's rules can make you holy. It's a heart issue. Holiness doesn't come into you from the outside. It comes from the inside to the outside. And so they're going about it the wrong way. They're focused on the exterior. They're focused on the laws and how to get around them and how to come up with enough technicalities where they could still live their lives any way they want it and still say that they're not breaking God's rules. Do we do that today? Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do. So if you're doing that, stop it. If you've convinced yourself that there's ways you can disobey the Lord and he'll let you get by, no, there's not. Check with him again. Check with him again and make sure that he gave you that okay to break the law or whatever he told you to do that you're not doing. Check with the Lord one more time on that. Okay, so now that scene ends, but Jesus is not done. And he's not afraid of conflict. And he's going into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. And he knows what he's going to do. He's going to upset them some more.
Moving on from there, Jesus entered their synagogue.
Look at Matthew. He's called it their synagogue, speaking of the Pharisees.
There he saw a man who had a shriveled hand. And in order to accuse him, they asked him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?
All right, so he's already told them that the disciples can pull this grain and eat it all day long. I've given you 3 reasons why. And so he goes into the synagogue, the teaching place, and the Pharisees are there waiting and watching, and they started up. They started up again. Is it okay to heal? Can you heal? Jesus, can you heal on the Sabbath? Because according to them, that's doctor work. and doctors can't work on the Sabbath. Are you going to do doctor work on the Sabbath, Jesus? What did he say?
He replied to them, "Who among you, if he had a sheep that fell into a pit on the Sabbath, wouldn't take hold of it and lift it out?
Ooh.
A person is worth far more than a sheep. So it is lawful to do what is good on the Sabbath."
Jesus is so wise. He's got all wisdom. He gave them a real-life, modern-day example. They had sheep. And they knew that if a sheep fell into a pit, they weren't going to leave it there for 24 hours. It might get devoured by a predator. It may have a broken leg. It might need medical attention. Whatever. They were not going to just let that sheep stay there. They're going to pick it up and lift it out of the Sabbath. And they might say, well, that's not something I do every day. So that's not my regular work. But according to the Pharisees, that was work. You couldn't pick up anything heavier than a dried fig is what I read this week. Crazy, huh? I mean, but there were exceptions because they made exceptions for everything. But Jesus said, wouldn't you pick up that sheep and get it out of there? And a person is worth far more. It's not even close. It's not even close. A person is worth far more than a sheep. Therefore, it is lawful to do good. So Jesus said, if you're doing good, you can do it any day of the week. Any day. Sabbath day, doesn't matter. If you're doing good, it's lawful. And then what does he say?
Then he told the man, "Stretch out your hand."
He gave him an impossible command because remember his hand is shriveled. He can't stretch it out, but Jesus said, stretch it out anyway.
So he stretched it out,
So
and
he
it was
did.
restored,
Amazing.
as good as the other. But the Pharisees went out and plotted against him, how they might kill him.
They've got to kill him because of that. He's taken away their power. He's taken away their authority. He's embarrassing them. He's asking them if they've read the Old Testament. The people think they're geniuses on the Old Testament. And Jesus says, have you read the Old Testament? Have you read about David? Do you know these stories? So, I don't know. It's a big conflict, right? Jesus is not afraid. He's not backing up. Let's get one more flashback, and this is an inline flashback, okay? I don't know if we've ever had one of these before. It's in line with Matthew, so we're going to read it right out of Matthew. But he's quoting straight out of Isaiah, but we don't have to go back to Isaiah because Matthew gets it completely, perfectly right. 4 verses right out of Isaiah. Read it for us, Jackie.
Jesus was aware of this and withdrew. Large crowds followed him, and he healed them all.
Amazing. He healed all in large crowds. That's hundreds and hundreds of people. He healed them all.
He warned them not to make him known, so that what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled.
So here's Matthew. He's an Old Testament expert, by the way, and he's going to give us these four verses out of Isaiah 42.
Here is my servant whom I have chosen.
Now this is Yahweh in golden, and he's talking about the Messiah. He called him my servant. So all of this is Yahweh in the Old Testament talking about the Messiah. Go ahead.
My beloved in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not argue or shout, and no one will hear his voice in the streets. He will not break a bruised reed, and he will not put out a smoldering wick, until he has led justice to victory. Justice will triumph. The nations will put their hope in his name.
Oh, this is so beautiful. This is really, really nice. Let me show you a couple of things here. First of all, we've got the nations. You know who that is, right? That's the Gentiles. That's everybody that's not Jewish. That's how the Jews referred to everybody that's not us, the nations. So the Messiah is going to proclaim justice to the nations, and the nations will put their hope in his name. A couple of more things. Look at these analogies right here. He will not break a bruised reed, and he will not put out a smoldering wick. Let me give you just a little bit of that, and then we're going to get out of here. A bruised reed is a picture of a person that's been wounded. When this reed is bent, it can never go back to its original form. Once the fibers are bent, it's permanently bent. Now you can bend it back, but it's got a crease in it. You've ever seen things like this? Natural, like plant stems. It looks so strong and beautiful and perfect, but pop, you just broke it or you just put a bend in it. You just put a curve in it, and you can never uncurve that curve. It's bruised. It's permanently marred. It will never be brand new again. But when Jesus sees a person that's bruised and marred and can never get back to pristine condition, he doesn't break it. And when he sees a smoldering wick, that's somebody who's fading out. That's somebody that's lost their fire. They've lost their flame. They're no longer burning brightly. They're just smoking. They're not burning. They've been reduced down to just a little bit of combustion. Almost out. But Jesus, he doesn't snuff out that smoldering fire. Because look at this. This is a little cryptic, and so that's why I put this in brackets here in modern day English. What this statement is saying is that justice will triumph. Jesus is going to make it right even though the reeds are bruised and even though the wicks are smoldering and they can never be completely made 100% brand new. He takes what we bring to him and he fixes it and he makes it work again. So Jesus brings justice. Justice will triumph. And that is our lesson this morning. But look at this before you leave the Bible. It hits you, it gets you, and it fits you. Jesus did not break God's law, but he exposed how the Jews, and especially the Pharisees, were misusing God's law. God desires compassion over enforcing human rules. And we saw that in the plucking of the grain and the examples Jesus gave from the Old Testament. And then finally, if you are bruised or if your flame is low, Jesus does not crush you because you're not perfect. Instead, the Bible says he gently restores you, he fixes you, he bandages you, he binds you up and makes you not like new, but as good as new, as if you had never been bruised or crushed. God bless you. Thanks for joining us today.